providing service like us.
This podcast as a service.
This podcast is the audio version of a Mexico Street Barker. No, this...
We're not as delicious as that, though. That's the problem.
I am definitely going to get the tamale guy someday. We were having dinner when he went by on his little bike last night.
Kind of have to. Speaking of two, Netflix now has 2 million.
Wow, that was just laid right in there.
Perfectly executed.
Yeah.
What do you say to this? I mean, it's.
I don't know.
Oh, and they
Yep.
And they raised their top tier pricing, $2.
Yeah. So right. So one of the little memes or themes or whatever around Netflix these days is that once you've gotten all the subscribers you can get, like, how do you keep growing? And the joke is you raise prices. It's not a joke. They've raised prices 3 years in a row, or raised prices 3 years in a row. But I don't know who wrote the shareholder letter. They went out yesterday. Excuse me. Still very dry here. Mm-hmm. Sorry. But he, she, them, whatever, mentioned that this was almost a temporary thing, not a temporary thing, not that they're going to lower prices, but that this is something you can do when the dollar is strong and, blah, 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 whatever. Mm-hmm. And they made the point that, we have X number of subscribers or X number of people in the world or in the country, and there's still growth to be had in subscriber numbers. So, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think once something like this hits the $20 range and you kind of, compare it to what else is out there in the world, it starts to become a question. I still think Netflix is the best service in the sense of volume of content and quality of content and all that. But yeah, and they also have, I don't know, they have other numbers. They look at, ads as a thing for Netflix somehow. I don't know how they make money on like 2 Netflix movies were in the top 10, but not by like revenue because they're not in theaters, right? Mm-hmm. This is like some kind of a Google search thing, like an interest gauge or something. But I don't know. It's a pretty big service. You can make a pile of junk like that Red Notice movie, and then be like, yeah, this thing was so great, we're going to make 2 more of them.
Yeah, I mean, if it keeps people subscribed, that's.
Well, so I just in a weird coincidence since we brought this up. That movie purported to take place in 3 or 4 locations around the world, and it was all filmed on this film stage, probably in London or something. Mm-hmm. They never went to any of those places, right? It was just all digital nonsense because they were paying 3 AAA stars to be in it, right? And just coincidentally, this week, my wife and I watched a movie also from Netflix, starring at best B-level stars or stars of the past or TV stars or whatever you want to call them. And this thing was actually, they went to Madrid, they went to Rome, they went to Paris, they went to London, they went to Finland. They were really there. Mm-hmm. So you can really tell, right? So it's, what do you want? You want the real place or you want the big actors? I guess you get a little bit of both on Netflix. So maybe that should be their theme, their little theme song. I don't know. Brad, we have big news for Ohio. I assume you saw this.
I did. I was gonna lead into this. So
nice,
Paul.
Nice.
I know. People when they think high tech, bleeding edge, they absolutely think Ohio, and we are
after Emmaus, Pennsylvania. They do.
We are stamping it again because Intel has announced they're going to spend $20 billion. So that's about a third of an Activision. On 2 fabrication plants in New Albany, Ohio, which is near Columbus, and employ about 3,000 people.
We got to coin a name for this, right? Is it like the Silicon Prairie, Silicon Midlands? I mean, what's
it's
Ohio?
Not so much prairie. I mean, I guess depending where part of Ohio is like mountainous, like sort of like near the Appalachians, but Silicon like core something. No, I don't know. Like
corridor,
Silicon flyover. I don't know, like
the Silicon Middle. I don't know, something.
Silicon Middle Earth. Now, people are going to look at this and be like, "That is a crazy spot to do this." And I mean, I'm in Ohio, and I somewhat agree, but not maybe
really,
not.
Right? I mean, honestly, let me centrally located is
not a bad thing. But also, let me explain too that near Columbus, Ohio, there is a massive Facebook data center. There is also a massive Google data center. Microsoft might have one there. But for whatever reason, Columbus, Ohio has turned into like a data center hub, and these things are all over the place up there. So Intel
Right.
adding this, like the infrastructure is there for the power capacity and the water needs. And
Well,
so,
okay. I mean, I'll put it a different way. I've actually I've made fun of Columbus, Ohio specifically, and I just because I've been there a couple of times, and there's
mhm.
really not much to do there. But I
Oh
think
no, there's
that's
not. I mean,
I
there's
don't
a
mean it
good
in a mean
football
way, but
team.
I just mean it's true.
Yeah.
But that's the point, isn't it? Why on earth would you put data centers in the most expensive place in the United States,
Right.
out in California,
Yeah.
when we
Doesn't
have
make
all this
sense.
land in the middle of the country,
Yep.
which is centrally located, by the
Yeah.
way, and we also have distribution networks which go through these places.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually think this makes tons of sense. And for a place like Columbus or any place where they might build something like this, having a multi-billion-dollar facility that's going to hire high-paying employees and yada 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 makes this place more desirable. And by the way, just speaking from my own personal experience in Pennsylvania, got to tell you, would rather have a couple of giant data centers nearby than 350 Amazon warehouses, which is kind of what we do have,
Mm-hmm.
with trucks and going all day long, every day, ruining the roads. This is a great thing for that area, I think.
Yeah. I was just trying to Google to see if they had like who all has them because I thought AWS had one there. I mean,
Mhm.
there's quite a few, and then of course you got to remember that these companies don't
Corridor,
actually really want you to know.
Silicon Corridor.
No, that's like New York or something,
Yeah, I see.
or that's
Yeah,
Silicon
we'll get there.
Alley.
We'll get there. We'll get
I don't know. Um, but yeah, I don't know. Like it's, I guess I got to buy Intel stuff now. Like that's
there. Well, look, I just got up, so I haven't written anything about this yet. But
Mhm.
in the back of my head, what I'm thinking about is since Pat Gelsinger came on board,
yeah.
the many commitments he's made to creating or refurbishing existing data centers around the country and the world, right? So
Hmm.
I seem to recall, and again, this is off the top of my head, but they have a European facility that people were freaking out about because I think it was in the $20 billion range, or maybe two of them. But I know they have facilities in Arizona and New Mexico and California, obviously, and probably Texas now. Maybe that was the other one they were doing in the United States was Texas. But I mean, these guys are pumping just tens of billions of dollars into the economy by doing this kind of stuff. It's astonishing. So there, if you thought Intel was going to roll over,
Hmm.
newsflash.
Yeah, no, they're spending dollars. So I don't know where some of the other ones are, but there's definitely a Facebook data center in New Albany, which is where Intel is building, and I'm assuming that's where
Okay.
Google's is. I
This
don't know if
is
Microsoft does, but AWS has one, Facebook and Google all right in that
and
section.
this is in the lower center part of the Ohio kind of
Yeah, so,
area?
well, Columbus is almost like dead smack in the center.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah. Okay.
New Albany is a suburb. I don't even know if you want to call it suburb. Like it's a rural
Mhm.
spot on the outskirts of.
Yeah, cool. That's great.
Yeah, so there you go. Kind of crazy a little bit there, and Google's apparently making an AR headset for like the 9th time. We'll get excited about it when it's supported.
Great. I'll get excited about it when someone wears it in the shower. Um,
Happy Friday, everybody.
that was a little Microsoft reference for everybody. We should address the Phil Spencer thing because one of the big concerns in the wake of this announcement about Activision Blizzard is, well, will they start taking games away from PlayStation, which I think
Yep.
would be suicidal.
Yep.
And then what about all those employees?
Yeah.
So you had kind of a fireside chat, right? Which
Mhm.
I'm also going to be writing about, I'm sure. They're not taking games away from PlayStation, guys. All right, just be simple here. I mean, that's stupid. And he addressed a bunch of different things, but one of the things he said I thought was really cool was he wants to revive Activision franchises from the past. And one of them was he referred to as Hexen. I think it was Heretic, but these were games that came out of it was Raven, which was to id Software what Activision was to Atari back in a million years ago, and they were creating games based on id's engines. And the first one was Heretic, which was a Doom engine game, as I recall. And then Hexen, I don't know if that was Quake Engine or not, but Hexen, I think they made at least 2 Hexen games. But Phil Spencer is going to go down in history for his contributions to the gaming industry. And I don't mean like, oh, he led the Xbox team or something. Like, who cares? No. This is a guy who has made a stamp on game preservation that I think is very important. And the backward compatibility stuff that Microsoft has done, I think, is incredible and is something the rest of the industry should follow. And now he's talking about bringing back games that have already died.
Hmm.
You know, it's awesome. I mean, it's just awesome. You gotta love this guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a very valid point that he's I don't want to say creating a museum because they're playable. Like they're going to probably be in Game Pass. It's
Yeah, yeah,
an
and
archive.
thus being available across platform, which I think is the key to this platform wars thing,
Hmm.
or this platform exclusives thing, which I wrote about a little bit yesterday. I was thinking about it later, and I realized, I probably should have kept going on it because there's a bigger point to be made, which is that Sony has been very successful in consoles because of exclusives, right? And they've done
Hmm.
a good job with
Hmm.
that. Microsoft bought up a bunch of game studios, and of course, people look at that and say, well, they're doing it for exclusives. But there are two things to this. Like, one is exclusives mean less when your platform is so diverse, right? When your platform is only a console, and not just a console, but like a specific console generation, you're being very limited in your audience, and that benefits that console, but doesn't benefit the game or the gamers more broadly. When your platform is something very broad,
Hmm.
like Xbox is now, where you can play on PC, console, multiple versions, mobile, etc., game streaming. The notion of exclusive is not as painful anymore. And someone who's like a PlayStation guy could say, well, I could still play this Xbox game if I subscribe to Xbox Game Pass. Maybe not on their console, although I'd like to see that happen, but elsewhere, and I think that's important. But the other thing is, I was also thinking about just like the amount of the numbers, here. So you think about a successful game console like the PlayStation 4, which is 10 years old, ish, 8 to 10 years old, whatever the number is. I guess 8 years old, and they sold whatever the number is, 120 million units, something like that.
Hmm.
Um, Compared to like the PC industry, which everyone thought was dead 6 days ago, that number, well, right, but that number doesn't seem like a big number. But the thing you got to understand about that is the PlayStation platform, which was based on the Nintendo platform from 1987 or whatever, which is what mobile platforms like Apple's App Store and Google Play Store are based on, is not about the units you sell of this thing. It's about the software, right? If Lenovo sold as many PCs in the past quarter as Microsoft sold consoles in the previous generation, which it did, Microsoft gets money for every single game that someone buys on that console.
Hmm.
It's a completely different financial situation. So even though you look at like the video game market and you say, well, how many gaming PCs are there? How many video game consoles are there? And it looks kind of small. You got to remember those people are buying several games per console or whatever it is, maybe dozens
Yep.
even. And you get the companies that make these platforms make money on every sale. That's why Apple and Google are in part are so big, because those platforms are humongous, and they're not. Apple actually is making a ton of money on the iPhone, but they're making a ton of money every time someone buys an app that runs on that platform. Lenovo doesn't make a cent if you buy an app that runs on their computer. You buy their computer, and that transaction's over. It's interesting. Like this is a big market. Just and it's a lot more than consoles. That makes sense. Phil Spencer, everybody.